Welcome to Game Changers with Molly Fletcher, where we take you behind the scenes with peak performers to learn what makes them tick and discover how you can apply their lessons to your life. I'm your host, Molly Fletcher. Where along the way did we trade our confidence and courage for approval and acceptance, and why? That's the question today's guest, Reshma Saujani, challenges us with in her new book, Brave, Not Perfect. Reshma is the founder and CEO of Girls Who Code, an international nonprofit working to close the gender gap in technology and change the image of what a computer programmer looks like and does. Her TED Talk, Teach Girls Bravery, Not Perfection, has been viewed more than 4 million times and has sparked a worldwide conversation about how we're raising our girls. As a mom of 3 teenage daughters, it's a message that I love and try to instill in my daughters. Reshma's work has earned her recognition on lists like Fortune's World's Greatest Leaders, Forbes' Most Powerful Women Changing the World, and Fast Company's 100 Most Creative People. Today, we talk about the important work she is leading with Girls Who Code and how to let go of our fear of being less than perfect. If you're interested in learning more about Girls Who Code, you can visit their website at girlswhocode.com, and you can also check out Reshma's podcast, Brave, Not Perfect. And one quick note before we get started. I'd love your feedback on this podcast so we can continue to deliver the type of content that you want most. Please take 5 minutes and complete our listener survey. You can find it on mollyfletcher.com by clicking on the podcast header or in the show notes of this episode. As a thank you, a few lucky participants will be randomly selected for prizes like a copy of my book, The Energy Clock, a Game Changer t-shirt, they're so comfortable, and a $25 Amazon gift card. Thank you for listening and sharing your comments. Let's jump right in. Here's my conversation with Reshma Saujani. Reshma, what a treat to have you on. Thank you for joining.
Thank you for having me.
Well, this will be fun. So let's start here. What inspired you to start Girls Who Code, and why were you the one to start it, right? I mean, it's just interesting that you did what you've done.
Yeah, I know. I always say I'm such a weird person to have started Girls Who Code. I was running for office, and I was on the campaign trail, and I would go visit schools. And in every school, I noticed pretty much the same thing, right? In every front row of computers, there would be lines and lines of boys, and classroom after classroom, it was the same, but there wasn't a girl in sight. And back then, in 2012, tech was then one of the highest paying, fastest growing industries. It was at a moment where women were, about to be the majority of breadwinners in America, right? They were the ones that were putting food on the table and making sure they pay the mortgage. But they were like completely not in this industry that was literally shaping our future. And if girls weren't taking computer science in elementary school or middle school, they had no chance of making it into the industry. And they had no chance of achieving the American dream. So, I started Girls Who Code to solve that. I remember thinking, Girls Who Code, that's a cool name. I went on GoDaddy.com. There it was, right? I bought the URL, borrowed some office space from a friend, recruited my first 20 girls for a summer program. And now, almost 8 years later, we've taught over 300,000 girls to code. We've reached millions through our programs. And, we've changed the trajectory for girls in computer science.
And how do you measure, right, your impact on Girls Who Code? How are you measuring it?
A great question. So we said, how many girls would we have to teach to get to gender parity by 2027? And so we have summer programs that we run, we have after-school programs that we run, and then we run these college programs. And so we basically ask our students, are you more likely to take computer science? And then are you taking computer science? And then did you major in computer science? So we can literally count them. And at the rate that we've scaled at the success rate that we've had in converting girls' interest, we are on the path to solving the gender gap by 2027, which is tremendous.
It's amazing. It's awesome.
And a lot of this is culture, right? I'm sure you have a lot of like girls around you, and like you ask girls what a computer scientist is, and they're like, it's a nerdy dude in a hoodie, right? He's sitting in the basement somewhere and he's drinking a Red Bull. Like, I don't want to, not only do I not want to be him, I don't even want to be friends with him. So much of this is cultural change, and then teaching computer science in a way that ignites girls' interest. And that's really been, I think, the special sauce of Girls Who Code. We're living such crazy times right now, but it's also like if you think about the past year, if you think about every movement, whether it's on climate change or gun reform, right, or equity, Black Lives Matter, it has been led by girls. And so if you give girls the superpower of technology and coding, they literally can create anything. They can literally solve anything. And that's the power of coding.
Absolutely. And you mentioned earlier your congressional campaign, and in your TED Talk, which I loved, you say that running for Congress at 33 was the first time in your life where you were truly brave. How so? Tell us more about that.
Yeah, I mean, I was raised to be a perfectionist. My parents came here as refugees. They were immigrants. They sacrificed, everything to give me a shot. And they raised me to be perfect, to be a good girl. And so I very early on learned to kind of give up before I even tried. And I would gravitate towards the things that I was good at, and I would say that I didn't like the things that I wasn't good at. So every decision I made was a calculated risk, right? I never really put myself out there to fail, and definitely not fail like in a public way. So look, when I started the congressional race, I did think I could win, right? I naively thought I could shake every hand, meet every voter.
Yeah.
And I was running against an 18-year incumbent in a Democratic primary. I basically did what Ocasio did, except 10 years later, she won and I lost. And it wasn't done back then. I just didn't know any better. And so when I lost, I know it was a colossal failure, right? Like 19% of the vote. I was humiliated. I was broke. And the biggest dream that I had was to be a public servant and change the world. And it was gone. The big reveal for me the next day was when I woke up, I was like, oh my God, I'm not broken.
I'm okay.
I'm okay.
Right. I made it.
I made it through. And it didn't kill me. And yeah, I'm embarrassed. And yeah, I'm like, I'm wounded, but I can fight another day. And that was like a big revelation for me, because I was like, wow, what are the other things that like I haven't done or tried to do or given up before even trying, because I talked myself out of it, that I should maybe try. And it was a game changer for me.
And Hillary Clinton is a mentor of yours.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me some ways, that she's inspired you, that she's influenced you.
Yeah, I just joined her Onward Together board, which I'm really excited about. I first, quote, met Hillary when I was right out of college. I had an internship at the White House, and I was watching her speak, I think in the Rose Garden. And she was giving this passionate speech about women and girls, and it just blew me away. Like I'd never seen a female role model quite like her. And so I've started volunteering on her on her campaigns, and quite frankly, just watching her from afar. And the thing that I've learned from her over the years is she is steadfast in her commitment to who she is and what she's fighting for. And she fails all the time. Mm-hmm. And she gets back right up, and she dusts that pantsuit, and she keeps going. Like, she has an incredible amount of resilience. I mean, there is so much mud slung at Hillary on a daily basis. And for the vast majority of us, men and women, we wouldn't be able to tolerate that. We would just like crawl in our bed, get under the covers, and just say, that's it. But she is so clear, right? And like we say in Hinduism, like, what's your dharma? Like, what do you put on this earth to do? She is so clear about that. And look, she was fighting for women and girls before it was cool. We live in a society that doesn't like strong women, and she knows that. And so she always went for the thing. She was always first. And it's not easy to be first. Like, everything that is possible for us to do as women today, as leaders, was paved because of her sacrifices. And you got to imagine, it absolutely hurts. right? It's not easy to get up every day and experience that kind of vitriol one day and then a deep kind of love another day, right? It's like, that's tough.
Tell me this, what's the big idea behind brave, not perfect? And I love how you talk about this, obviously, but can you get our listeners inside of that a little bit?
Yeah, so I did this talk about being brave, not perfect, and how we socialize our girls to be perfect and not brave. And 5 million people watch the talk,
Yeah.
and I am like inundated, right, with
Right.
with people who are like, I do that, my daughter does that, my wife does that, my colleague does that, and it seemed as though we were having this collective experience of how we were socialized. And here's how it goes: like, from the time we're little, right? If you were to take 10 minutes and you would sit on a playground, you'd see what I'm talking about, right? We tell our boys to climb to the top of the monkey bars and just jump head first. But for our girls, we're like, be careful, honey. Don't swing too high. Did you take that toy away from her? Give it back. Is your dress dirty? Come over here, let me clean you up. We are literally protecting our girls, wrapping them up with bubble wrap. And it starts in the name of protection, physical protection.
Mm-hmm.
We don't want our girls to get hurt. And then it continues into emotional protection. We don't want our girls to get disappointed or rejected or to fail. And perfectionism has huge consequences, like on every aspect of our lives.
Sure.
You see it in school, right? Studies will show that, when college students, female college students sign up for an economics major, if they get a B in the introductory level course, they drop out. Whereas boys are like, I got a B. Let me go run for president, right? Completely different, right?
Yeah.
Reaction to that. You see it in mental health, right? Women suffer from anxiety and depression at twice the rate as men. And you see it in work. Studies show, right, women will not apply for a job unless they meet 100% of the qualifications. But for men, it's 60%. And so if we're waiting to be perfect to lead, if we're waiting to be perfect to live, we'll never close the leadership gap. And I think the antidote to this is bravery, right? I think that when you learn how to be brave, you learn how to be imperfect. And it's bravery in those little moments. I am sure you've experienced, as I have, walking down the street, someone bumps into me, and I say, oh my God, I'm sorry. Like, how many times a day do we apologize for? I mean, you see it in a virtual environment that many of us are living in, where you're on a Zoom call and your dog barks or your kid kind of runs through the door, and you're immediately like shutting the video off, putting it on mute, because you don't want anyone to see the mess behind your scenes. What do men do? They put their kid on their lap and everyone says, oh, wow, John, you're such a good dad.
That's so true.
It's such a different reality. One of the things that I really saw this on my book tour was during question and answer. Even if I was speaking about what perfectionism and the cost of perfectionism to women, and I was in a room full of women and men, when it was ready for questions, the first 10 hands raised were men, right? And what were the women doing? They were looking at each other. They were collecting their thoughts. They were, scribbling them down on paper, perfecting the perfect question, only to never get the chance to ask, because by the time they raised their hands, I was in my car on my way home.
Right.
And that experience of being in meetings or in conversations where, like, the person next to you, the male next to you, says exactly the same thing that you didn't have the courage to say is literally like it's like cut by a million times, right? It's all of these little things that happen to us on a daily basis because of our socialized perfectionism that cut into us reaching our fullest potential and us ultimately finding joy.
Well, and if we don't try, because we don't want to fail, it impacts obviously our ability to grow, right? And I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, it is all the little moments that we feel that little pit in our stomach and we go anyway, is those little bravery sort of moments. And to your point, I mean, the key is obviously when we do fail as women in these moments, that we get back up like you did after the campaign and have done in remarkable ways. But teaching our girls, that's huge.
Yeah, and it's so funny, Molly, I feel like our definition of bravery is almost too big. It's like when we think about bravery, we think about like saving babies from burning buildings. And I actually think that like preparing yourself to be brave in the smallest of moments prepares you for that big moment that's going to come. Like an example, I I didn't used to use my hands a lot when I was little because I thought I wasn't technical and I wasn't math and science inclined. And so, if I couldn't get something right away, if I couldn't change my tire right away, I would like turn to my dad and be like, hey, can you help me? And that behavior extended into when I got married, right? And we would get a complicated toy for my child, or my phone would, get broken. I would look at it for 1 second, and if I couldn't figure it out, I would hand it to my husband. And it made me feel small. It made me feel weak. And I just started, since writing this book, just sitting with my frustration and figuring it out. And I feel so strong.
That's awesome. That is fantastic. That's a great analogy, because I'm quick to lean into my husband too and, go do something maybe I'm more comfortable with.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And it's interesting. They don't do that, right? They are invigorated by doing things they can't do. And even when they can't do them well, they tell themselves that they're great at it. Mm-hmm. It's funny. It's actually quite remarkable.
Well, it's remarkable, and you're a part of trying to make that different, particularly for women, which is awesome. We need it. In your book, you ask, I love this question, a really powerful question, which is, where along the way did we trade in our confidence and courage for approval and acceptance, and why? How would you answer that question?
I think, when does it start?
Mm-hmm.
When did it happen? Who taught me that? And I do think it starts around 8 years old, when we start kind of watching the women in our lives, and we watch how they judge themselves, how they talk about themselves, how, they seek approval, and we start mimicking them. When women would get my book, they'd be like, I'm going to give it to my daughter. I'm like, no, you read it. Because it starts with you.
Yeah,
and
that's cool.
I really do think we learn how to do this calculation in our heads, saying, where we determine, should I tell you what I really think, or should I tell you what I think you want to hear? Because we want you to like us. Mm-hmm. And it's this need for approval, this need to be liked, is something that I think is very learned. It's not ingrained. When I talk, I show this, what I call my lemonade example. And years ago, they had done this experiment where they essentially spiked lemonade with salt instead of sugar. And when the little boys that were, again, around 8 years old, would drink the lemonade, they would immediately spit it out and say, it's gross. I'm not drinking this. What did the girls do? They would guzzle it down and say, thank you, it's delicious. Same lemonade,
wow,
salty and gross,
mm-hmm.
Completely two different gendered examples of how they would react to telling the interviewer how they felt about it, because they didn't want to make them feel bad, and they didn't want them to not like them.
I think the good news is I'm raising 3 daughters. My husband and I have 16, 16, and 17-year-olds, and I hope and pray they would say that lemonade was awful. I hope I'm doing my part.
Yeah, I'm actually raising 2 boys, and it's also like I tell parents, give yourself a break, because it's not just you,
right?
There's
sure.
so much influence and culture around you that send them the wrong signals, and so you just have to be super dogged about it.
You talked a little bit about how we socialize girls differently than boys, and how those differences play out over time. How do you unlearn it, right? Or let go of the fear of being less than or perfect? How do young girls or women in general unlearn this?
I think it's bravery. I think bravery is the antidote to perfection. And I think you literally practice being imperfect. That's what I love about coding. And this is a story I told in my TED Talk. It's, when girls were first learning how to code, most of them thought that they couldn't do it and they weren't smart enough. And when they wrote their first line of code, they would say to their teacher, I don't know what to do. And the teacher would press undo on their computer screen, and they would see that they actually wrote a line of code, but then they deleted it. So instead of the student saying, hey, what did I do here? Can you show me what I should do differently? They rather show them nothing at all. But when they learned how to code and they overcame their fear, and they didn't give up before they tried, and they did it, and they built that algorithm or that website or that tool, they then said to themselves, gosh, what are the other things that I've told myself I can't do or I'm not smart enough to do that I should try? So it was a behavioral shift. Learning how to code is almost like learning how to build your bravery muscle. So I talk a lot about, how do you build that muscle? And it's a practice. And, the first thing is, I always say, you can't be brave if you're tired. You will never pick the braver choice if you're tired. And every woman I know is exhausted, right? We're exhausted. So this practice of self-care, of resting, of doing something for you, and actually doing it at a time that is the most inconvenient for everybody else. After I had a baby, I needed to go work out. I didn't like the way that I looked. I didn't like the way that I felt. And the best time for me to get to the gym was at like 7:30 in the morning. And that's when the dog wanted to wake up and the baby was waking up. And the most courageous thing I did that year was like walking out the door at 7:30 and being like, yeah, I'll figure it out. I did something for myself. You know, the second thing is this idea of practicing imperfection. We think that if we do something imperfect, that there's going to be greater consequences for it than there actually are. An example of this is an email with a typo in it. Every woman I know spends endless minutes, hours, rewriting her emails for fear there's a typo in it, because we go so quickly from I made a mistake to I'm stupid to I'm going to get fired in all about 5 seconds. So what I say to folks is send an email with a typo in it and send it to semi-consequential and see what happens, because what will happen is nothing. And then think about all the things that you do on a daily basis that are, quote, perfect, because you're worried about the consequences, and stop doing them perfectly. And you will find more time. You will find more joy. You will find like all your worst case scenarios, quite frankly, have not come true.
Right. So just start. I'm hearing you say, just start. Lean into these moments and just keep going.
Start. I mean, for Girls Who Code, I was not an entrepreneur. I was not a nonprofit leader. I did not know how to code. And I just bought the URL.
Right.
And then I mentioned it to somebody at dinner party. I took too many steps, but I just started.
Yeah.
Yeah. And part of my big reveal from writing this book too was that I think such a source of unhappiness for many women is this feeling of regret and envy, the woulda, shoulda, couldas. I wish I started that podcast. I wish I quit this job and started my company. I wish I got out of this marriage that I'm not happy in.
Yeah.
And we see other people living the life that we didn't live, and it fills us with regret. And I think part of joy is having a life without regrets. There's nothing, I don't have a lot of regrets in my life. Because, fantastic. And I get rejected all the time. Like, things don't work out for me all the time, but I try. And so rejection to me, failure to me, is a much better feeling than regret and envy.
Well, and you've built that over time, right? I always love to say that no is just feedback. That's all it is. It's just feedback. And you can use that as a stepping stone to your point, and you have. And that's what you're on a mission to do, which is amazing. You know, you talk for a minute about parenting and that you have 2 boys, and you talked about being gentle on ourselves, which I agree with. How else does this play into parenting? You know what I mean? For the moms, for the dads, for the fathers of daughters, for the mothers of daughters, for anyone in the world, right, that wants to help other women or help lift up young women. What advice would you give them?
Yeah, I think it's like show the mess behind the scenes. I think so much of this perfect mom is from our perfectionism. Like, we think we have to, home bake our cookies and, send our kids to 100, different classes and reorientate our schedule around them and participate in every PTA meeting. And it's exhausting.
Yeah, for sure.
And it's not possible.
And it's not sustainable.
It's not sustainable. And I remember I used to intentionally bring my firstborn everywhere with me. Like, if I was on Trevor Noah's show, there he was in the green room. I had to give a commencement speech at Harvard. There he was sitting in the front row. And part of it was not fun or easy. He would be yelling or throwing things at me, but it was chaotic. And I was doing that because I have a lot of young women who work for me, and I didn't want them to feel like they had to pick between being a mom and doing what they love. But also to show that, like, you can't have it all. And it is messy, and it is stressful. And you know what? It's okay.
Yeah, for sure. How does bravery and confidence go together, right? Like, because being confident helps you, I think, lean into bravery at times. How does that play together in your mind?
I think bravery builds your confidence. So one of the tools that I talk about in my book is this idea of, like, doing something you suck at. So every month or a couple months, I'll pick something that kind of scares me. So like surfing or like karaoke. And I do it not for getting good at it, but I do it because I recognize that I could, one, find joy out of something that frightens me, and two, that it builds my confidence to try new things. And I think that that's really important. Like, why don't we raise our hands for promotions? Why don't we leave jobs that we hate? Why do we stay in relationships? Because we're scared of the unknown. We're scared to do something that may not actually like work out or what might not be successful. I think that there is something about doing physically challenging things that actually build confidence and build bravery.
No question. And it's interesting that you say that, because there's a section in your book where you talk about the connection between sports, sort of physically, if you will, and bravery. And you share the story of a focus group you led where you were getting totally different responses on failure and rejection from these women.
Yeah, I was blown away.
Yeah. And it turned out they had all grown up as athletes. So, how can sports help us, be brave? And what did you learn from that?
Yeah, I was blown away by this focus group because all these women that were athletes, and they were so confident and so brave and, so invited failure and like didn't have a lot of regret. And it was all about sports because kind of you learned these things, right? You learned how to fail. You learned how to not be the best. You learned teamwork. You learned collaboration. You learned all of these things. See, I think at the root of, perfectionism and so much of kind of our lack of advancement as women in some ways is because we stay stuck in things that we're good at, even though we don't like them. And I think what sports teaches you is that you're not going to win every game. You're not going to be the best player all the time, right? And it's okay. But you're going to figure out what you love and what you like. And that lesson to me is incredibly valuable. I know like there's statistics how like if you look at top female employees at major financial institutions or law firms, they stay much longer than men do. Men move around a lot, but guess what? They get promoted. And women stay, and we get stifled because we stay in what's safe. And I think sports teaches you to not stay in what's safe.
Yeah, for sure. Does failure motivate you?
Yes.
Okay.
It does. Because in some ways I realize that failure motivates me more than success. And this is something I've been thinking a lot about lately. I realize that I don't get excited by success in the same way I used to. My book's an international bestseller. Girls Who Code wins the most innovative nonprofit. And I'm like, great. And then I'm on to the next. But failure sits with me. And I think sits with a lot of us a lot more deeply. And it's what creates drive. Like, I am certainly a leader that thrives in crisis. Like when shit hits the fan, I'm like, okay, I'm at my best.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, when everything is going great, I'm anxious. I was, thinking a lot about how anxiety can be like a superpower. My friend Dr. Tracy Dennis talks a lot about this, and it's because if you can actually lean into your anxiety and you can say, why am I feeling this way? What is this bringing up for me? You can actually make it work for you. And I'm a big believer in that.
Tell me about a moment that's happened to you and how you've done it.
I think personally, I had a lot of trouble conceiving. I had a lot of fertility issues, a lot of miscarriages. My second baby is here via surrogate, and I'm a big, big, big advocate of surrogacy. And I spent a lot of years, almost a decade, just anxious and depressed and I had to kind of lean into like, I know I'm meant to be a mom. I'm not going to give up. I'm not going to let this break me, right? I'm going to keep trying. And it was a long path, but, that served me. I think, Girls Who Code, I had never managed an organization that big. I had never led an organization. I was like, I'm the visionary. Here's what we're going to do. I didn't know about KPIs and, bringing people along with you. Like, I had to learn those things. And I would go home a lot of nights for so many years and be like, I'm sucking at this. Like, I have deep imposter syndrome and deep sense of like, I'm a bad leader. I'm not doing this well, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, no, I am going to teach girls to code. I'm going to do something about the poverty gap. I'm going to advance women. I'm going to create opportunities for girls. And I just kept leaning into it, even though, many a nights many years, I didn't feel like I was doing a good job.
And you reframe these moments in your mind, right? Which I love. I mean, you reframe your mindset to allow you to keep going, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And listen, I've run 2 elections and lost twice, and that was hard for me because if you asked 13-year-old Reshma what she was meant to do in this earth, she would have told you she was meant to be a public servant.
Mm-hmm.
And history has not borne that out for me. I always joke, like every time I run for office, I lose, but Girls Who Cook get stronger. You have to also listen to the signs a little bit, right?
Sure.
And I think it's a hard calculus of like, am I giving up on this because it's not working out for me? And I just have to try a little harder, work a little harder, wait for the right moment. Or am I giving up on this because the universe is telling me something that I need to hear? I certainly struggle with that.
I think everybody does. I mean, how do you sort of say what is meant to be and listen to that while also saying, transcending through fearful moments creates growth and there's powerful things on the other side of it, right? It's a bit of a dance that I think everyone navigates at times.
Yeah.
What are some strategies to help everyone who's listening, but that you've used to bounce back from setbacks? Can you kind of get me inside of some of those moments? I mean, you've talked about being brave. You talked about taking these little steps. You've talked about the muscle and how it makes us stronger. Anything else when you think about people that are maybe listening that are, maybe dealing with challenges or have experienced a setback, what would you tell them?
So here are my 3 favorite strategies, I guess my hack on failure. The first thing is give yourself a finite time to grieve and then move on.
Mm-hmm.
So like after I lost my election, I gave myself a month to like drink margaritas, right? Ask my husband like a million times what I did wrong, feel sorry for myself and then move on.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that month, I didn't keep doing the look back and the questioning and the brooding. I moved on, like really tried to move on. And so give yourself that time and then move on. I think the second thing, and I've done this since I was a little girl, is I surround myself with rejection. I used to collect my rejection letters. I, recently didn't even get into my community board, and I like posted that note on the top of my fridge. And every time when I get my orange juice, right, I look at it because it's almost like it helps you not take it so personally because you've literally surrounded yourself with rejection.
Cool.
And it builds that armor. And I think the third thing is really soliciting feedback from others. I think I talk about this in my book. When I lost my second election, I ran against this amazing woman, Tish James, who is now the Attorney General of New York. And, like months after the election, we both had to speak at this rally. And, again, my son was like it was raining outside and he's like, pulling on me. And like, I didn't prepare. She gets up, she nails it. I get up, I'm flat. And, I'm feeling crappy about it. We get in the car and I'm like to my husband, well, how'd I do? He's like, you sucked.
Oh, wow.
Right? But I have people around me who give me really honest feedback. And it's like, I love Serena Williams, and I really looked up to athletes about this. And when you think about any great athlete, they literally sit at the edge of their ability in critical feedback, right? They have a coach who's sitting there saying, do it again, do it again, do it again. It's never personal.
Right.
And so if you can approach feedback that way and literally solicit, not positive feedback, negative feedback, you will grow.
For sure. It's so true about sports. I mean, I am such a big fan of, and I think that's why business people, we need coaches, right? We need people, whether it's coaches, but it's people that have absolutely no agenda except to give us the really and the hard truth so that we grow.
I've always had one.
Good for you.
Yep. And I've had a life coach, right, Raw Goddess, for like 8 years. And she has helped me enormously by just giving me the honest truth. And, that question of like, am I meant to be doing this? Am I not meant to be doing this? Like really having some of that like analysis for you. And that whoever that person is in your life, you need that. It's almost like we think sometimes we don't deserve that, or that's for if you're really great. Everybody needs that.
Yeah, for sure. No question. Well, we see how it works in sports, and it's the same way, right, in life, whether it's business. It's powerful. Tell me this, how does bravery transform relationships?
I think that bravery is at the core of like relationships and in relationship transformation. Because again, it helps you not hold back and just quite frankly, be honest. I have found, especially with parenting with my spouse, like there are moments where I just want to throw them out the window.
The kids or the husband?
Both, all three. I'm able to have honest conversations, and I think that is really, really important. I think that sometimes it's almost like bravery is the hardest for us to be brave in our relationship. I have an interesting relationship with my mother, and there are a million conversations that I know that I need to have with her, and I find it really hard to do that, again, because of my own issues or judgment or confidence or whatever it may be. And it's about really trying to confront those and be brave enough to have the conversations that you need to have.
Because I find that at the end of those conversations, the relationships, if handled with love and authenticity, get stronger.
Absolutely. And if you think about why we don't like to have those conversations, is we don't like that feeling of being uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm, for sure.
It's why we tell the person, I'm sorry, instead of excuse me, because it's easier.
So tell folks, how can we find out more about Girls Who Code and maybe get involved?
Yeah, well, I would go to girlswhocode.com and learn more about the work that we're doing. We have 10,000 Girls Who Code clubs across the country. We run 80 summer immersion programs. We have 200 college loops. The culture work that we're doing with our books and, have reached, over 500 million people. It's a movement, and it's a movement to change the world. Listen, I think that girls will, they'll lead us, they'll heal us, they'll change us. And there's no better investment than investing in our kids and investing in our future change makers. And that's what this movement is about. I know you have 3 little girls, ours not so little anymore, but you see the power of their empathy and their compassion and their need and want to make the world a better place. How do we lean into that for them?
Absolutely. Well, you're a big part of that. Thank you so much for what you're doing. We need this. We end with rapid fire, so I'm going to fire off some quick questions for you, and you just
do it.
All right. So, introvert or extrovert?
Both.
Nice. Awesome. That's the first time I've gotten that. Cool. First job?
Dog walking.
A guilty pleasure?
Chocolate chip cookies.
Favorite book?
Long Walk from Home.
Favorite app?
Rent the Runway.
One thing you can't live without?
My dog.
Advice for female entrepreneurs?
Be brave, not perfect.
I could have anticipated that one. So the show's called Game Changers. So one last question. Who or what is a game changer who inspires you and why?
I'm going to say Hillary Clinton. Mm-hmm. Her resiliency, like I said, her ability to dust off her pantsuit and keep going, and her steadfast commitment to women and girls.
Mm-hmm. As is yours. Reshma, thanks so much for taking time. You're an inspiration.
Thank you, Molly, for having me.
Thanks, as always, for listening to Game Changers with Molly Fletcher. If you like the show, be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts. There you can listen to previous episodes and leave us a review, which helps other people find out about the show. For more about me, visit mollyfletcher.com. Until next time, stay curious and be bold.